This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi, in honor of our Siyama and Sefer Daniel, I want to learn with you the Ramban's commentary to Parshas Bereshis, where the Ramban gives a precise date when Mashiach will come. And even though we had a whole shiur about different predictions, we never saw the Ramban. And the Chassam Sofer has a whole tshuva on this Ramban. And we're going to see something very interesting. Okay? How the 6 days of creation play into the 6,000 years of world history. And does it parallel exactly? Okay? So we're going to take a look at this, and this will be in honor of our Siyama and Sefer Daniel.
Just be conditioned for the Mashiach at that time.
Maybe while we have the bagels, we'll read the first pasuk. Okay. I want to show you the Ramban. Well, is it precondition? Well, there's a concept in Zachu or Achlishanu and so forth that we could always speed up the Mashiach. Whenever the time could come, we could always make it come sooner. But I want to focus on the Ramban's commentary to Bereshis. Vayichu hashamayim va'oretz v'chol tzom v'yichal elokim hayom hashvi vayivorech elokim es yom hashvi v'yichal kivoshal yom la'aftay asher bara elokim la'asais. These are very perplexing words. God created to do. He created the days to do. What is that supposed to mean, God created the days to do? The Ramban learns that God created each day, that day of creation would then go and create the history corresponding to it. And the Ramban goes on to say that the 6 days of creation parallel the 6,000 years of the world's history. So for instance, on day 1, when God said, let there be light, that corresponds to the first day of Hashem. We know a day in the
How long did that day?
We know a day in the eyes of Hashem is how long? 1,000 years. Ki elef shanim be'einecha ki yom. 1,000 years for God is like a day. So day 1 of creation corresponds to the year 0 to the year 1,000. Day 2 corresponds to 1,002. Day 3, 2 to 3. Day 4, 3 to 4. Day 5, 4 to 5. Day 6, 5 to 6. So right now, we are holding in which day of creation? The 6th day of creation. The year 5,000 to 6,000 is the 6th day of creation. Says the Ramban. Try to do this quickly. Vida, you should know. Ki nichlal oid b'milas la'asais, included in the word la'asais, is Kisheishes Yimei Bereshis, the 6 days of creation, Heim Kol Yemei Sailam. Included in them are the entire history of the world. Ki Kiyuma Yiyah Sheishes Alafim Shan. If you want to know how long will the world last, 6,000 years. Shalakach Amru, Yoimoi Shalakadosh Baruch Hu Elaf Shanim. Says the Ramban, the first 2 days of creation, was anything in the world yet significant? No, it was a big mess. What was in the world in the first 2 days of creation? Water. Water here, water there. Like the sailors on Christopher Columbus' ship said, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Right?
The first 2 days are equivalent to 2,000 years.
Right.
Avram Avinu was born in 1948.
Says the Ramban, the same way in the first 2 days of creation, nothing significant was created. Nothing happened in the world for the first 2,000 years. In the Gemara Avodah Zarah says like this: the first 2,000 years of the world are Tohu Vavayu. From year 0 to 2,000 to Vavayu. From year 2000 to 4000 are Yemei Torah. Avram Avinu ushers in the Yemei Torah.
Avram Avinu was born in 1948.
Good question. We're going to address that. Okay, we're going to get to that. But when did Abraham begin to recognize his Creator? At age possibly 52. Even though it was the year 40 when he was 48 years old, there is an opinion 52. So in the year 2000, ushered in the era of Torah, until the year 4000, which ushers in the Yemais HaMashiach. That's what the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah. Okay? Now, for the first 2 days of creation, God created water. Nothing was completed. This alludes to the first 2,000 years of creation. No one called out in the name of God. And likewise, Chazal say in Avodah Zarah, 2,000 years of emptiness. But you can't deny that in the first day of creation, God created Light! That corresponds to the life of Adam HaRishon, who was the light of the world. Who did he himself recognize God? On the first day of creation, God created light. Keneged ha'elef shel yemois Adam, corresponding to the 1,000 years of Adam's life. Shahaya oiroi shel olam. Adam was the light of the world. Maker es boira. He recognized his creator. And what do you mean? But Enosh started serving Avodah Zarah? Nah, says Ramban, very likely he did not start serving Avodah Zarah until the year 1000 was over.
Shem, Aver, and Noach.
They begin the second. Remember, the Mabul happened in the year 1656.
It's within the first 2,000 years.
No, so far that's year 1000.
No, but it's Es Hashem and Salach Noach.
Yeah, but like the Ramban says, just to know God and not teach the world, it's still water. It's still water. Nobody called down the name of Hashem. V'ulai loy avad enosh avodah zara ad shemes Adam HaRishon. Very likely, no one served idols until Adam died. On the second day of creation, God did what? He created the Rakia. What did the Rakia do? It divided between the upper waters and the lower waters. Likewise, in the second 2,000 years, in the year 1656, God brought the Mabul. He put Noach in the Teva, and he separated between the righteous and the wicked. Very interesting. B'yom hasheni hi Rakia v'hi mavdil shebai hayu mavdalim Noach ubanav hatzadikim min harishayim shenidonu b'mayim. On the third day of creation, God said, let the dry land appear. Let the earth sprout forth produce. Let the trees produce fruit. So too, from the year 2000 to 3000, what happened? Avram Avinu starts teaching the world about the Torah in the year 2000. The Torah is given in the year 500 years after Avram, right? Avram was in 1948. The Torah is given in the year 2448. We're in the Midbar for 40 years until the year 2488. We go into Eretz Yisrael in the year 2488. We build the Beis HaMikdash in what year? 2928, 440 years after we enter the land. So already at the end of the third, the Elef Shlishi, the world starts to produce trees and fruit. What's the trees and the fruit? Torah, Beis HaMikdash. It brings produce. It gives productivity to the world. So he says like this, very amazing, right? The third day of creation, which is when the dry land appeared and the trees began to produce fruit, corresponds to Abraham coming to the scene, the Torah being given, the Beis HaMikdash being built, Bayem HaShlishi, Nireis HaYabasha, V'Hatzmicha, V'Asiyas Peros, Hu Ha'elef HaShlishi, that's the third millennia, Hamaschil B'Yois Avram ben Memches, which begins when Abraham was 48. Shana v'az heicha likor b'shem Hashem. He then began to call out in the name of Hashem. V'tzamach tzaddik, and the flourishing of the tzaddik began to sprout. Ki mashach rabim ladasas Hashem. He was able to draw many to know God. K'may shadarshu v'yasanefesh hashas b'charon v'tzivas beiseves banav acharav v'shamru derech Hashem lasat stako mishpat, and that continued to progress. The Jewish people received the Torah on Har Sinai. And the Beis Hamikdash was built. Says the Ramban, but what we're learning is that before the millennia begins, what is going to be accomplished in that millennia already begins in the earlier millennia. For example, Adam, who is the light of the world, went only to the year 930. The Avodah Zarah probably started a little bit before the second millennia. Avram Avinu, who ushered in the years of Torah, began a little bit before the third millennia, 1948. The Beis HaMikdash, which ushers in 3000 to 4000, was already built in the year 2928. Why is the history of the millennia begin in the earlier millennia? Says Ramban. Because a day always begins Ben Hashmashos, the night before. So the history of the millennia already begins to start a little bit earlier. He says, as soon as there's sunset, Yechashiv ki yom machar begins the next day. The Alkain, and therefore Yaschel Inyan Kol Yom Kaidim Loy Ma'at. That is why the history of the millennia, the 1,000-year period, begins a little bit before. Kasher Nolad, Avraham, Be'elef Hasheni, when Avraham was born in the second millennia. V'chein tira b'chol yom v'yom. Now let's talk about years 3,000 to 4,000. We know the temple, the first base of English, was built in 2928, after creation. It stood for how long? 410. 410. So that takes you till
3338. 29, 28, 410 is 3338.
good, till 3338. 70 years of Galus until 3408.
Right.
420, the second Beis Hamikdash stands till 3828. So the second Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash is built 72 years before the fourth millennia. The second temple is destroyed 172 years before the fifth millennia. Before, right? So it says, B'hayom HaRavi, what happened on the fourth day of creation? The luminaries were created. The big luminary, the second luminary. The first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash. The big luminary, the sun, Bayis Rishon, the Shechina. The second luminary, the moon, the second Beis Hamikdash. Very interesting. V'hayom HaRavi, on the fourth day of creation, Nivru B'ay HaMa'aris HaGadol v'Hakatim HaKochavim, V'yoymai Be'elaf Hadalad, and in the fourth millennia, Heichel Kasher Nivna Beis Rishon Ayin Beis Shana Acher Ben Yanai, begins 72 years into the building of the first Beis Hamikdash. Ad Achrei Habayis Hasheni Kuf Ayin Beis, until 172 years after the second Beis Hamikdash. V'nei B'yom Hazeh, during this millennia, L'chol B'nei Yisrael Haya'ar, there was tremendous light. And the Ramban goes on to say that the first Beis Hamikdash, there was a big fire on the Mizbeach. Like we once learned, it crouched down on the Mizbeach like a lion. The second Beis Hamikdash, the fire crouched down on the Mizbeach like a dog, a little bit smaller. The sun, the moon. Rabbi said we move on to the fifth millennia, which is from the year 4,000 to 5,000, which corresponds to the fifth day of creation. What was created on the fifth day of creation? The fish and the birds. From the year 4,000 till the year 5,000, mankind was like a bunch of fish and birds. They were murdered, they were killed, they were trapped with no consciousness at all. What is this? What period in history does this represent? What years?
Don't we have the Tanakh?
What years does this represent?
Millennia.
The fifth millennia.
Fifth, you said it already.
No, we're at the fifth millennia. So right now we're in the year 5774. So 774 years ago.
1,700 years ago, right? Would be the beginning of the
1,700 years ago, yeah.
So 1,700 years ago is the second.
Until 700 years ago.
Third century.
Yeah.
In our terms.
Right. So says Ramban, this was a period of time where the nations rule over mankind, like fish, like bugs. They step on you like bugs. They didn't even believe in God yet. They had no consciousness. This is what the Ramban says. And then the sixth day of creation, and this is where we want to get to.
Well, what about all the Tanaim and the Rishonim the first?
But look, the Roman Empire murdered us. They shed our blood.
Okay, but we still had the greatest Gedolim upon.
Yes, but the luminary set, the Beis Hamikdash set, the Tanaim also. The early Tanaim were gone, right? Rabbi Kiva was gone. Now look what he says. Bayom Hashishi, and this is what we want to get to. Ba'boiker, on the sixth day of creation. The sixth day of creation starts in the year 1200 or so, right? 12. The sixth Ba'boiker Toitzi Haaretz Nefesh Chaya Lamina. The animals are created. The animals, the wild animals, the lion, the bear. They tear their prey. They destroy. But they're still closer to man than the fish and the birds. Which means, says Ramban, beginning in the last millennia, mankind will have more knowledge of God. There'll be more religion in the world. There'll be more knowledge of the Creator. But they'll be more destructive. They'll be more disastrous. Look what he writes. Bayom Hashishi ba'boiker, in the morning, toitzi aretz nefesh chai lamina behema v'remes chai aretz lamina. The wild animals. And the wild animals are going to be created before sunrise. Because animals come out at night. And then there's sunrise. And how much time is there between Alois HaShachar and Eitz HaChama? Tell me, 72 minutes. What percent of a 12-hour period is 72 minutes?
10%.
10% on the dot. That means from Alois HaShachar until sunrise are 72 minutes, which is a tenth of a day. So in an 1,000-year period, how many years is that? 100 years. Says the Ramban. You want to know when Mashiach is coming? 100 years into the 6th millennia, which takes you to the year 5100. The Ramban is going to say more accurately, 5118. That's the year 3140 or 3158.
Which is equivalent to...
Excuse me, 5100 or 5118. Or 1358 or 1340.
600 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, Ramban is saying, the same way man was...
Say that? Didn't Rashi say 1313 or 1312 when we learned...
Rashi learns 1290 plus 62.
Oh, he was
1352. 1352.
Rambam is earlier.
The Ramban is 6 years later.
No.
Yeah, because it's basically he's going to say 118. He's going to say it's not exact. Okay, 118. He says, he says like this.
5118 you said, right?
Yeah, 5118. He says, Va'oz nivra ha'adam b'tzem aleikim. After sunrise, man was created. The creation of man represents the coming of Mashiach. Adam Arishon being created on the 6th day represents the coming of Mashiach. Vuzman mem shaltai. Because day is the time of the dominion of man. Shenemar yetzei Adam lefa'aloi l'avaydas adei arev. V'hu elef hashishi. Because in the beginning, look what here are the key words. Ki betchilasai, before the day, yimshul v'yachayos. The animals will rule. Heim ha'malchios, they are the kings. Asher lo yadu es Hashem. V'yacharei asirisai, and after a tenth of the day, kisher hanei tzachama liyoim, the amount of time it takes for the sun to rise, Yavai HaGoyel, the Redeemer will come. Shenemar, by how do I know the Redeemer is compared to the sun? The Kisai Kishemesh Negdi Zehu ben David Hanasa B'Tzel Melekim. David HaMelech, who was created in the image of God, and says the Ramban, how do I know Mashiach is compared to man? Because Daniel taught us. I believe in the 7th parak, Kedachsiv, Ba'aru imanoni shemaya, behold, in the cloud of heaven, kavar inish. The Ramban says on the next line, V'yiyazeh, kuf yud ches, that's 118 years, achar chameshes halafim, after the beginning of the 6th millennia, after the year 5000, l'chalois dvar Hashem mipi Daniel. Because Daniel said Mashiach's coming 1290, after what? After the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed in 68. 1290 takes you to 1358. So the year 5118.
This is rough, 1358.
5118 is
Rosh Hashanah, you know.
okay, but 5118 is 1290 years after Churban Bayis Sheni.
Which is 1358.
Okay.
And 68 was the destruction.
Right. Then he said, and the Ramban is learning that way. Then the Ramban says, and of course, the 7th day of Shabbos corresponds to the Elef Hashishi, which are the Yemais HaMashiach. But again, think very carefully. The Ramban is saying that if Adam was created 72 minutes into the morning, which is a tenth of the day, and if Mashiach corresponds to Adam, so Mashiach will come 1/10 of the millennia into the millennia, which is 100 years into the millennia, 5118. The problem is, the Ramban predicted what? 1358. The Ramban passed away in the year 1270. Didn't come. Comes the Chassam Sofer in the Tshuva, and the Chassam Sofer says, and if, we can't even say something like this about the Ramban, Chassam Sofer says Ramban made a mistake. Not just in the fact that Mashiach didn't come. What was the mistake of the Ramban? Says the Chassam Sofer, there was a major blunder over here. What's the blunder? Because if every millennia corresponds to a day of creation, that means the millennia corresponds to a 24-hour period. The first 12 hours of the day are the night. The next 12 hours correspond to the day. So if Hashem created Adam 72 minutes into the day, that's 72 minutes after the first 12 hours of the day. So that means the Mashiach is not coming in 51:18 according to the Ramban's Cheshbon. You have to already give 500 years into the 6th millennia, corresponding to the night, and 72 minutes into the day is not 100 years, it's 50 years. Right?
Yeah, because it's the 10th of the half of the day.
Right, because the 12-hour period is not corresponding to 1,000 years, it's the 24-hour period. So 72 minutes is a 10th of the daytime. 10th of a 12-hour period. What's a 10th of a 12-hour period? Right? It's a 10th of a 500-year period, which is 50 years. So says Chassam Sofer, even according to the way the Ramban made the Cheshbon, Mashiach can't come until the year 5,500. Excuse me. 5,500 is when you start counting. 5,550. When is the year 5,550?
24 years ago.
When is the year 5,550?
24 from 2.
In other words, in the year Taf Kuf Nun.
1790?
Taf Kuf Nun is exactly 1790. Even according to the Ramban's Cheshbon, the Ramban forgot about 500 years. So the question is, says Chassam Sofer, how can the Ramban forget about 500 years? Listen to what he writes. Look at number 2. This is from the Shas Tshuvas Chassam Sofer, Chelek Vav, Siman Samach Vav. Va'asayim b'davar toiv be'ikvos Mashiach. Let me conclude about something good regarding the coming of Mashiach. A'oyer al divrei Ramban. I want to point something out on the words of the Ramban, Parshas Bereshis, al apasuk asher bar lekim lasos, sham herech legalos keit sakamas. There, the Ramban goes on to reveal the hidden end. Says the Chassam Sofer, you know why the Ramban made a mistake? Umeiroiv cheshkai, because of his great desire, v'ta'avasai, and his passion, l'biyas HaMashiach, kirev cheshbainoi liyos karav l'zmanoi. The Ramban predated the time. He wanted Mashiach to come, b'ta ta'os gedoyla b'mechilas kvoidei haraman. He made a big mistake.
Rabbi, can I ask you a basic question?
Yeah.
We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away the knowledge of Ketzei Yamim from both Yaakov and Daniel.
Right.
If he took it away from those people, isn't it? Lahavdil, I don't mean it to be heresy or
No.
to think about if HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want Yaakov and Daniel to know it, and he didn't tell Moses.
The Ramban's not saying he knows it. The Ramban's not saying he knows when Mashiach is coming. The Ramban is saying, based on these psukim, it would seem to be coming at this and this time. That's what the pasuk says in Daniel. Yishoitetu by Rabbim. The Ramban even writes, Yishoitetu by Rabbim means sort of we're being encouraged. We're being encouraged to probe. We're not allowed to say if it doesn't come by this time, it's not going to come. But the Ramban understands it to mean there's a certain encouragement given. Look what he writes. V'yatik l'shoni v'chedushay Torah shali. It says, I'm going to write over what I already wrote in my chedushim on the Torah. V'noirois nefleisei Ramban. I have a wondrous question on the Ramban. Shekasav Yom HaShishi B'Boker, that the Ramban writes in the 6th day in the morning, V'acharei Asirisai, after a 10th in the day, Kashir Hanetz Hacham L'Yom, Yavai Hagoyal, and this is 118 years into the 6th millennia. V'Tema Rabbah, it's a big wonder. Ki Shachach Hayom Hoylech Achar Alayla. The Ramban forgot a simple point that the day comes after the night. Vayhi Erev, Vayivoiker Nimsa Kitav Kov Shanim Arishonim. The first 500 years Shalav Hashishi Heim Bebechinas Laila, which is the Erev of Yom Hashishi Shabriya, and then that was the creation of the Chayos. And if you want to wait after 500 years, Neitz HaChama, you have to wait how many years after Neitz HaChama? 72 minutes, which is 50 years. You want to fulfill what David HaMelech says, that his sprouting forth is like the sun. That takes you at least till 1790. So Ramban, who predicted what? 1358.
Was off. 500,
Mistake.
Almost 500 years.
Says Chassam Sofer, number one, you have to know that when we say Mashiach is like the sun, like the full sun, not the rising of the sun. When the sun rises, the sun is not in its full glory. When is the sun in its full glory? High noon. So high noon would be what year?
How many hours after the...
57:50. Midway into the day. 57:50.
So halfway from the second 500.
Right. But says the Chassam Sofer a very interesting thing.
We got 36 years to go.
No,
No, 74, 24 years ago.
yeah. Says the Chassam Sofer, he has a personal tradition about this. You ready for this? Amnam nira she'ein shayach kashemesh negdi al haschalas hetznaitzitza. When David says, when the sun is opposite me, he doesn't mean when it begins to rise. Ela achakach. This supports my personal tradition. The pasuk says, "Acharei nimkar geula tia ba'aretz v'yia gam zesad." This supports l'remez hamakubalanu, to the allusion that we have a tradition about. Acharei nimkar geula tia lai. After nimkar will the geula come. What does Chassam Sofer mean after nimkar? I believe what he means is that we know it has to come after what? 5,500. After 5,500. How much after 500?
Said halfway.
So how much? Okay, when exactly? After Nimkar. Nimkar, Nun is 50, Mem is 40, Kaf is 20.
290.
What's Nimkar?
290? No.
90, 110, 310.
310.
58, 10. 58, 10.
We're not going to be around.
What year is that? In 36 years. In 36 years.
Yeah, 26 times 30.
36 years. But again, Zacha, Achishan, right? Zacha, Loi Zacha. For Zacha, we should be Zacha to see coming Mashiach. Achishana b'mhera v'yameinu, speedily in our days.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.